The phone rang just after sunset. I was sitting on my worn-out sofa, watching the last bits of orange light fade behind the apartment building across the street. It was a Tuesday. A completely ordinary Tuesday. The kind that disappears from your memory the moment it's over. I had worked my 9 hours as a project manager, bought groceries on the way home, and was now trying to decide if I had the energy to make dinner or if I should just eat a bowl of cereal. That's when my phone lit up with the name Mom and Dad. A familiar knot tightened in my stomach. It was the same feeling I'd gotten since I was a teenager. A call from them after 8 p.m. never meant good news. It never meant, "Hello, sweetheart. Just calling to see how you are." It always meant something was wrong. And something was almost always my older brother, Michael. I let it ring 3 times before I answered, taking a slow breath to steady myself. "Hi. Mom." "Sarah. Honey. How are you?" Her voice was bright. Too bright. It was her tell. When she used that cheerful, sing-song voice, it meant she was about to ask for something big. Something she knew I wouldn't want to do. "I'm fine. Mom. Just got home a little while ago. Is everything okay?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. I didn't have the energy for small talk tonight. "Oh, everything's fine, dear. Your father and I were just talking." I could hear my dad's low murmur in the background, along with the sound of the television playing some old western. It was all so painfully normal. A perfect stage for the ambush I knew was coming. "We were talking about Michael," she continued, the cheerfulness dropping just a little, replaced by a tone of serious family business. "He's in a bit of a bind, sweetheart. Here it comes," I thought. I leaned my head back against the sofa cushions and stared at the ceiling. A faint water stain from the upstairs neighbor's leaky bathtub looked back at me. "What kind of bind?" I asked, my voice flat. "Well, you know that house he bought a few years ago? The one in the nice subdivision?" I knew it. I'd been there once for a housewarming party where Michael showed off his new granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, all while complaining about how much it cost. My parents had beamed with pride, telling everyone how their son was such a go-getter. They didn't mention that I had given him the $5,000 for the down payment, a gift they'd insisted I provide. "It's what family does," my dad had said. I never saw that money again. "I remember the house," I said. "He's run into some trouble with the loan," my mother said, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "The bank is making things very difficult for him. They're threatening to take the house. Sarah. His family's home." Michael had a wife, Emily, and a young son, Noah. They were the shield he always used. Everything he did, every bad decision he made, was always reframed as being for his family. And my parents were his biggest enablers. "That's terrible," I said. And I meant it. It was terrible for Emily and Noah. But for Michael, It was just the predictable result of his own choices. It is terrible. My mother agreed, seizing on my words. And that's why we're calling you. Your father and I have been looking at the numbers, and we just don't have that kind of money. But you've always been so good with your finances. The compliment felt like a lead weight. Being good with my finances meant I worked 60 hours a week, lived in a small, affordable apartment, drove a 10-year-old car, and didn't take vacations. It meant I was responsible. And in my family, being responsible meant you were the designated cleaner of everyone else's messes. Mom, what are you asking? There was a pause. I could hear her take a deep breath, preparing to deliver the final blow. Then my father's voice came on the line, gruff and impatient. He must have taken the phone from her. Sarah, it's your duty, he said. There was no preamble, no softness, just a command. Your brother's loan is in trouble. You have to pay it back. It's your duty as his sister. I sat up straight. The casualness of his statement hit me like a physical slap. Pay it back? Dad, what are you talking about? What is the amount? It's a big number. My mother chimed back in on the phone. But we know you can handle it. You can figure something out. What is the number? I insisted. A long silence stretched over the line. Then my father's voice again, mumbled and annoyed as if the number itself were an inconvenience. $590,000. The air left my lungs. 590,000. It wasn't a number. It was a life sentence. It was more money than I would probably see in the next 20 years. The idea that they could even suggest it, that they could say it out loud, was so absurd, so completely disconnected from reality that a strange thing happened. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a cold, sharp smile. The kind that doesn't reach your eyes. It was the smile of a person who has finally seen the entire ugly picture with perfect clarity. For years, I had been the family safety net. I was the emergency contact, the last-minute loan, the quiet fixer. I had accepted my role because I thought it was born from love, from a twisted sense of family loyalty. But this was different. This wasn't asking for help. This was a demand for my entire future. Sarah, are you there? My mother asked, her voice laced with a new anxiety. My silence was unnerving her. I'm here, I said, my voice calm, the smile still on my face. Because in that moment, as they sat in their comfortable living room plotting how to sacrifice my life to save my brothers, I already knew something they didn't. I knew about the phone call I had received that morning, the one that had made my hands shake and my blood run cold. The one that had started to connect all the dots I had refused to see for so many years. The loan wasn't mine. I had never signed any papers for Michael's house. I had never agreed to be his co-signer or his guarantor. The signature on the bank documents was a forgery. And I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones exactly who had done it. The Golden Boy. the one who could do no wrong. Sarah, you need to understand. My father's voice boomed, trying to assert his authority. Family comes first. I understand perfectly, I said, and my voice was so quiet, so devoid of emotion that it made them pause again. The smile on my face faded, replaced by a cold resolve. They thought I was their pawn, the reliable daughter they could always count on. They had no idea that they had just pushed me too far. They had no idea that the game had changed. And they had no idea that I was about to be the one to flip over the entire board. That morning had started like any other. The sun was weak, filtering through the blinds of my bedroom window. My alarm went off at 6:30 a.m. And I went through my usual routine. The call came at 9:15 a.m. just as I was about to log into a team meeting. The caller ID was an unknown number with a local area code. I almost ignored it, assuming it was spam. But something made me answer. Hello. Good morning. Am I speaking with Ms. Sarah Jenkins? The voice on the other end was professional, female, and crisp. This is she, I said, tucking the phone between my ear and shoulder. Ms. Jenkins. My name is Jennifer Cole. I'm calling from the collections department at Summit Valley Bank. This call is regarding your mortgage account number ending in 4,821. We're calling because your account is now 90 days delinquent, and we have not received a response to our previous notices. I stopped clicking my mouse. My hand froze. I'm sorry, I said, laughing a little. I think you have the wrong person. I don't have a mortgage. I rent an apartment. There was a rustle of papers on the other end. Ma'am, I can assure you I have the correct person. Sarah Marie Jenkins. The property address is 124 Oakwood Lane. That was Michael's address. The house with the granite countertops. A cold feeling started to spread through my chest. That's my brother's house, I said slowly. My name isn't on his mortgage. According to our files, you are the primary borrower, Ms. Jenkins, Jennifer Cole said, her tone unwavering. The loan was taken out 4 years ago for the amount of $650,000. The current outstanding balance is $592,154. That's impossible, I whispered. There has to be a mistake. I can verify your identity if you'd like, she offered, and there was a hint of pity in her voice. She proceeded to recite my date of birth and social security number. She had everything. My name, my address, my identity all laid out on a stranger's desk, tied to a debt that could shatter my life. Then, like a blurry photograph snapping into sharp focus, a memory surfaced. Christmas. About 4 or 5 years ago. Michael had pulled me aside into the kitchen. Sar, can you do me a huge favor? He had asked, leaning against the counter with that charming smile. I'm trying to get this house, but the bank is being a pain. My credit is a little shaky right now. Just let me use your name for a form. It's temporary. Just to get the application pushed through. I remembered being hesitant. But then Mom had walked in. Oh. Sarah. You should help him. He just needs a break. Sweetheart. It's the least we can do to support him. The guilt. The pressure. I had relented. Okay. I had mumbled. Just a form. You're the best sister ever, Michael had said. Standing in my kitchen 4 years later, that memory felt like a betrayal. A cold, calculated one. The form wasn't just a form. Temporary had turned into 4 years. He hadn't just used my name. He had stolen it. That night, after talking to my parents, sleep was impossible. I dug through my file boxes at 2 a.m., searching for proof. In a folder labeled Financials 2021, I found a thick packet from Summit Valley Bank. I had mistakenly filed away without opening. I spread the pages out on the floor. Mortgage agreement. My name at the top of every page. And there, on the last page, was the signature. Sarah M. Jenkins. It was a flawless copy. But it was too good. My real signature was quick. A little messy. This signature was precise. A careful piece of art created by someone who had studied my handwriting. It wasn't just about stealing my money. It was about stealing my identity. Michael had learned how to be me on paper just long enough to ruin my life for his own convenience. I didn't need a detective. I knew who had the access, the motive, and the complete lack of conscience. I whispered the name into the silent room. Michael. My mother called on Thursday. We're having Sunday dinner. Sweetheart. Roast beef. Your favorite. Please come. We need to talk about this situation. They wanted to ambush me again. To smooth things over. Okay. Mom. I said. I'll be there. I walked into my parents' house on Sunday afternoon. The smell of roast beef was a sensory trap designed to lull me into compliance. Michael was already there, laughing about something with my mother. He hugged me as if everything was normal. He had committed a felony against his own sister, and he was acting like we were about to have a pleasant meal. Dinner was a masterclass in denial. Finally, during dessert, I put my fork down. Does anyone know about a mortgage under my name? I asked, my voice steady. The table went silent. Oh, that, Michael said, shrugging as he ate his pie. I told you I just used your name to help get approved. It's a formality. It's not like it hurt you. The rage surged. It's not like it hurt me. I repeated. My credit score has dropped over 200 points. I have a collections agent calling me every day. They're threatening foreclosure. But the worst part is that you forged my signature on a federal document. Now hold on, my father growled. Forged is a strong word. It's the correct word, I shot back. Family helps each other. Sarah, my mother cried out. Your brother needed help. You have a good job. You have savings. It's what you do for family. I have helped and helped and helped, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. Then why am I the only one who ever pays? I walked out of that house, leaving them in the ruins of their perfect dinner. The next morning, I was a different person. I made an appointment with a fraud attorney named David Thorne. I laid my stack of documents on his polished wooden table, the forged mortgage packet, my real signature, the bank notices. David reviewed them in silence. When he looked up, his eyes were sharp. Sarah, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is felony identity theft and mortgage fraud. These are serious criminal charges. So, what can we do? I asked. First, we file a police report immediately. Second, we notify Summit Valley Bank's fraud division. They will void the loan and remove it from your credit. And regarding Michael, if the police pursue charges, he could face significant legal consequences, including jail time. Then let's start fixing it, I said. We spent the rest of the morning drafting the paperwork. By the end of the day, a police report had been filed, and a certified letter was on its way to the bank. I left David's office feeling lighter despite the gravity of the situation. I had stopped being a victim and started being a participant in my own defense. If this story resonates with you, please subscribe to the channel and share this video. Your support helps me grow and continue sharing these experiences. 3 days later, the inevitable knock came at my door. It was my mother, holding a homemade apple pie. Sarah. Honey, she pleaded through the door. We just want to talk. Why did you call a lawyer? Why did you go to the police? I opened the door but didn't invite her in. He's not fixing anything. Mom, he's lying. And you're enabling him. He knows this is felony fraud. You're tearing this family apart, she snapped, her mask falling. You're putting your own brother in danger. Do you want to send him to jail? I didn't put him in danger, I said firmly. He did that himself when he decided to forge my name. You need to leave. She stared at me, realizing for the first time that I wasn't backing down, and walked away in silence. 2 days later, the retaliation began. My HR manager, Karen Miller, called me into her office. They had received an anonymous email accusing me of falsifying financial documents and manipulating family members. It was obviously Michael. I can shed light on this, I told Karen calmly. I forwarded her the police report, the letter from my attorney, and my credit report showing the fraud. This is a direct retaliation for my decision to pursue legal action against my brother for his crimes. Karen's attitude shifted instantly from suspicion to apology. Michael had tried to dig my professional grave, but he had only dug his own deeper. The courtroom smelled of old wood and stale coffee. I sat next to David Thorne. Across the room sat Michael, looking pale and drawn, with my parents behind him. The hearing was short. The evidence was undeniable. The bank's forensic expert confirmed the forgery. The judge looked at the binder of evidence, then at Michael. "The evidence presented here is clear," the judge announced. "The signature is a forgery. The loan associated with 124 Oakwood Lane is declared null and void. Summit Valley Bank is ordered to remove this fraudulent loan from ES. Jenkins' credit history immediately." A wave of relief washed over me. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, given the egregious nature of this fraud, this case will be referred to the district attorney's office for criminal review. Michael slumped in his chair. Jail time was real now. I walked out of the courtroom, my heels clicking on the marble floor. My parents and Michael were standing in the hallway, looking defeated. My mother started to say something, but I didn't stop. I walked right past them, out into the bright sunlight, and didn't look back. 2 weeks later, on a rainy Saturday morning, they came to my door again. All three of them. Michael looked broken. Nothing like the arrogant brother I knew. "We need your help, sweetheart," my father whispered, standing in the rain. "The district attorney is moving forward. He could go to jail. Please, Sarah, can't you just tell them it was a misunderstanding?" "You didn't ask for help," I said, standing in the doorway. "You stole it. You forged my name. And when I stood up for myself, you tried to ruin my career." I looked at Michael. "You did this. And Mom and Dad enabled you. I'm not responsible for your choices anymore." I closed the door gently. The soft click of the lock was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Later that morning, the rain stopped. I walked to the farmer's market and bought a bouquet of bright yellow tulips. I arranged them on my kitchen table, the same table where I had once stared at fraudulent bank statements. Now, it held only sunlight. Sometimes walking away isn't selfish. It's survival. And in the quiet aftermath of my own storm, I finally understood that saving myself was the greatest duty I had ever fulfilled. The obligation was over. My life was finally, truly, my own. Their comfort would disappear with me. Travis's joke wasn't a joke at all. It was a prophecy. They would celebrate my vanishing. And in doing so, they would be celebrating their own ruin. And as I sat there bathed in the morning light, I decided I was going to give them exactly what they wanted. I was going to give them a reason to celebrate. The day after my sleepless night of planning was a Sunday. It should have been a quiet day. Mark usually spent it watching golf. and I would typically use the uninterrupted time to get ahead on work for the week. But a sense of calm, focused urgency had replaced my usual routine. While Mark was yelling at the television, I was on my laptop in the office drafting a timeline, a step-by-step guide to my own emancipation. I was so engrossed in comparing shipping logistics for my office equipment that when my phone rang, the sound made me jump. It was my mother-in-law. My stomach tightened. For a brief moment, I considered not answering. I could just let it go to voicemail. Let the call fade into the background noise of my old life. But then I realized this was an opportunity. It was a chance to test the waters, to confirm that the narrative I believed existed was real. I took a deep breath and answered, pitching my voice to its usual pleasant daughter-in-law tone. "Hi, Linda. How are you?" "Elena." "Dear, I'm wonderful," she chirped, her voice overly sweet. "I was just calling to say thank you again for a lovely day yesterday. It's so good that you make sure Mark has time to spend with his family. We all know how demanding his job is." The condescension was so natural, so baked into her words that an earlier version of me would have missed it. You make sure Mark has time. As if he were a child and I were his scheduler. As if his time was the only time that mattered. "He enjoys seeing you all," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Oh, we know. And we're just so proud of him," she continued, a sigh of motherly pride in her voice. "He works so hard to give you such a nice life. I just wanted to thank you, dear, for supporting his career goals. It takes a strong woman to stand behind a successful man." There it was again, the carefully constructed world where Mark was the hero and I was the humble, supportive sidekick. A bitter taste filled my mouth. I looked at the financial plan on my screen, the numbers that represented my hard work, my intelligence, my success, and I decided right then to push back just a little, just to see what would happen. "I'm glad you see it that way, Linda," I began, my heart starting to beat a little faster. "But I've always been curious. What do you think I do for work?" There was a slight pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, confused by the unexpected question. "Well, you know, dear," she said, a hint of patronizing laughter in her tone. "You have your little web thing. It's so sweet of you to have a project to keep you occupied. It's important to have hobbies." A project? A hobby? $487,000 in revenue last year. And she called it a sweet little project. The rage I'd felt the night before came rushing back, cold and sharp. But my voice remained steady. "And who gave you that impression, Linda, that my work is a hobby?" I asked. The line went quiet for a full 5 seconds. Her confusion was turning into discomfort. I had broken the unspoken rules of our dynamic. I wasn't supposed to ask direct questions. I wasn't supposed to challenge the family narrative. "Well, I suppose Mark has mentioned it," she finally stammered, her tone suddenly defensive. He just says you enjoy tinkering on the computer. Honestly, Elena, there's no need to be so sensitive. And that was it. The final damning piece of evidence. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a case of a family being old-fashioned or simply ignorant. This was a story that had been written, edited, and distributed by my own husband. He had actively, deliberately, and consistently painted a picture of me as a dilettante, a woman playing with a computer while he, the real man of the house, went out and slayed dragons. I thought back to all the times he'd simplified my job for them. The time I'd explained a complex data migration project, and he'd laughed and said, "She's basically making a fancy spreadsheet." Mom. The time I'd won a Small Business Innovation Award, and he told them I'd won a prize at my computer club. Each memory was a small cut, a tiny act of betrayal that I had ignored. Now, all at once, I was bleeding out. He hadn't just allowed me to be invisible. He had deliberately erased me. He had taken my success, my ambition, my intelligence, and hidden it away where it couldn't threaten his fragile ego or the comfortable patriarchal hierarchy of his family. Thank you for clarifying that for me, Linda, I said, my voice now devoid of all warmth. It's been very illuminating. Before she could respond, I ended the call. I sat there in the silence of my office, the phone heavy in my hand. I was no longer just a victim of circumstance. I was the casualty of a long and calculated campaign of sabotage orchestrated by the one person who was supposed to be my partner. The last flicker of doubt, the last shred of hope that I was perhaps overreacting, was extinguished. My decision was no longer just a plan. It was a necessity. That night, the tension in our house was a living thing. I was quiet. But it wasn't the wounded silence he was used to ignoring. It was a cold, watchful silence. I made dinner, moving around the kitchen with a mechanical efficiency. When Mark came home, he dropped his keys on the counter and tried to kiss me. I turned my head slightly so his lips landed on my cheek. He didn't seem to notice. We ate in near silence. He talked about his day, about a difficult client and a joke his boss told. I just nodded, pushing my food around my plate. He finally seemed to register my mood. "Everything okay, Elle?" he asked, his brow furrowed in that way that was meant to show concern. "You've been quiet ever since the reunion." I looked at him across the table. I saw the man I had once loved, the man I had agreed to protect and build a life with, and I felt absolutely nothing. "I'm fine," I said. "Just thinking about work." He smiled. A familiar, condescending smile. "Tough day at the blog?" he asked, the old joke falling from his lips out of habit. I decided this was the moment. No more secrets. No more hiding. "Actually, it was a pretty good day," I said, my voice casual. I took a sip of water. "I finished a project today. The client just sent the final payment. Oh. Yeah, that's great, he said, his attention already drifting back to his plate. Enough to buy those new shoes you wanted. A little more than that, I said. It was $50,000. He stopped chewing. He slowly put his fork down and looked at me, a genuinely baffled expression on his face. He started to laugh. A short, nervous bark. $50,000? What? For a year's worth of work? He was trying to make it make sense, to fit it into the narrative he had built. No, I said, my gaze unwavering. For 6 weeks of work. The color drained from his face. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. I could see him doing the math in his head, the calculations sputtering and failing against the firewall of his beliefs about me. You're joking, he said. It wasn't a question. It was a command. I'm not, I replied calmly. That's fairly standard for a corporate systems overhaul. He kept staring, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something else, something that looked like fear. But that's more than I make in 6 months. I know, I said. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It was filled with the weight of 7 years of lies. He looked completely lost, like a man who had woken up in a foreign country. How much do you make, Elena? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I had promised myself I would be honest. No more hiding to protect his ego. His ego was a cage I had been living in, and I was about to set it on fire. Last year, my gross revenue was just under $500,000, I said. After business expenses and taxes, my take-home pay was about $380,000. He flinched as if I had physically struck him. He pushed his chair back from the table, the legs scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. He stood up and started pacing the dining room, running his hands through his hair. No, that's not possible, he muttered, shaking his head. If that were true, that would mean you make more than you. I finished for him. I make more than you. Mark, I make more than you and your father and your brother combined. I paid off your parents' house. I bought your brother's truck. I paid for that cruise. I pay for most of this house. These cars. This life you brag about to them? He stopped pacing and turned to face me. His face, a mask of fury. But it wasn't the anger of being lied to. It was the anger of being exposed. Why would you do that? Why would you keep that from me? He yelled, his voice cracking. You asked me to, I said simply. Years ago. You asked me to downplay my success because it made things weird with your family. I was just respecting your wishes. Respecting my wishes? No. You were trying to humiliate me, he accused, his voice rising. "You've been lying to me this whole time, making me look like a fool. You've been threatening my image, my position in my own family." That was the core of it. Not the lies. Not the money. His image. His position as the provider. The big man. The hero. My success wasn't a partnership to him. It was a competition he hadn't even known he was losing. He didn't see the years I had spent protecting him. He only saw a betrayal of his authority. I stood up from the table, my own composure finally starting to crack. "You think I was competing with you? I was supporting you." "Mark, I was supporting your entire family. I was pretending to be small so you could feel big. And you and your family repaid me by treating me like I was nothing. You erased me so you could be the star." He had no answer for that. He just stood there breathing heavily, trapped between the man he pretended to be and the man he now knew he was. The argument was over. Our marriage, I realized in that moment, was also over. It had been over for a long time. I was just the last one to know. The 3 weeks after that night were the strangest of my life. On the surface, nothing changed. Mark and I moved around each other in a state of cold, silent truce. He was wounded and sullen. I was distant and focused. He was waiting for an apology, for me to admit I was wrong and for things to go back to the way they were. He had no idea that I was systematically dismantling the life he thought we shared. My days became a masterclass in quiet efficiency. While he was at work, I executed my vanishing plan with flawless precision. I was no longer an emotional, wounded wife. I was a project manager, and my own liberation was the project. First, I handled the finances. I spent an entire morning on the phone with a business banker from a major firm based in Seattle. I opened a new set of business and personal accounts. Then, with a series of cold, emotionless clicks, I initiated the wire transfers. I watched as hundreds of thousands of dollars, my dollars, flowed from Texas-based banks to accounts in Washington state. I left exactly enough money in our old joint account to cover the next month's mortgage payment and one cycle of utility bills. It was more generous than he deserved. I systematically removed my name from every shared utility account and credit card. A process that was tedious but deeply satisfying. Each call, each form filled out was a thread being cut. Next, I handled the business. I signed a 1-year lease on a small but stunning office space in a building overlooking Elliott Bay. I did it all online, the virtual tour, the e-signature on the documents. It was clean, modern, and had no history. I hired a Seattle-based logistics company to coordinate the pickup and delivery of my essential office equipment. The movers were scheduled to arrive on a Friday, the day I planned to leave. They would pack up my office under the guise of moving some equipment to a new co-working space downtown for a trial period, a lie I knew Mark wouldn't question. He never paid attention to the details of my hobby. Then came the personal logistics. I found a perfect apartment in Belltown online and signed the lease. I didn't pack clothes or furniture. I planned to buy all of that new. I packed only the things that were intrinsically mine. I went through the house when Mark was out, gathering the few items that held my own history, the framed photo of my parents, The professional awards and certifications I had kept hidden in my desk drawer like a dirty secret. My university diploma. A box of old journals. I packed them into 2 small, plain brown boxes and stored them in the trunk of my car. The rest of the house, with its comfortable furniture and shared memories, suddenly felt like a stranger's home. It was his. All of it. He could keep it. My emotional state during this time was one of surreal calm. The anger and hurt had burned away, leaving behind a core of cool, hard resolve. I was watching my life from a distance, observing the actions of a woman who was finally taking control. The ultimate test of my transformation came on a Tuesday. About a week before I was set to leave, Mark texted me from his office. "Hey, can't find my lucky pen. The silver one your parents gave me for my B-Day. Can you look for it and bring it to my office? Got a big meeting." 5 years ago, I would have dropped everything. I would have torn the house apart to find that pen, then driven 45 minutes across town to deliver it, happy to be the supportive wife who saved the day. 3 weeks ago, I would have seen the text and felt a fresh wave of resentment at his casual entitlement. That day, I simply looked at the message on my phone. His needs, his priorities, his lucky pen. For the first time, they generated no emotional response in me at all. They were just words on a screen. A request from a man who was about to become a stranger. I held my thumb over the screen and deleted the message. His luck was no longer my responsibility. The family that had mocked my existence, the husband who had traded my identity for his own comfort, was about to find out exactly what life looked like without me in it. And I felt nothing but a quiet, thrilling sense of anticipation. On a quiet Friday morning, the plan came to its conclusion. Mark had left for work at his usual time, giving me a stilted, awkward kiss on the cheek at the door. He still thought we were just in a fight, a bad one, but one we would eventually move past. The obliviousness was staggering. As soon as his car was out of the driveway, I went into motion. The logistics company I'd hired arrived precisely at 9, 2 polite. Efficient men packed up my entire office, my monitors, my computers, my files, my chair in under an hour. When they were done, the room was just a room, empty and anonymous. After they left, I did one last sweep of the house. I walked through each room, a ghost in my own life. I felt no nostalgia, no sadness. It all felt like a movie set I was ready to leave behind. My car was already packed with my 2 small boxes of personal items and an overnight bag. Everything else I needed, I would buy. I was starting over completely. My final act was the note. I took a piece of thick cream stationery from the desk in the now empty office. It was the only thing I had left behind. I used a simple black pen, the ink flowing smoothly across the page. My handwriting was clear and steady. I wrote the words I had been composing in my head for weeks. "Mark, I'm taking your brother's advice and disappearing. Since your family would celebrate my absence, I thought I'd give them what they want. You'll find the accounts have been changed, and the mortgage on this house is now solely under your name. The automatic payments will stop at the end of the month. Consider this your chance to prove you're the provider they all believe you are. Elena. I didn't sign it with love. I didn't sign it at all beyond my name. It was a statement of fact, not an emotional farewell. I walked into the kitchen and placed the note in the very center of the gleaming granite island. I put the house key on top of it, weighing it down. It was the last piece of our shared life, and I left it for him to find. I walked out the front door and didn't look back. I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway for the last time. As I drove through the familiar suburban streets, I felt a weightlessness I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. It was the weight of their expectations, their dismissiveness, their carefully constructed lies. And now it was gone. I drove for hours, heading north. I didn't cry. I didn't even turn on the radio. I just drove, listening to the sound of the tires on the asphalt. Each mile a tangible measure of my growing freedom. By the time the sun began to set, I was crossing the Texas state line. Late the next evening, exhausted but more alive than I had felt in years, my headlights illuminated a welcome sign, its green paint glowing in the darkness. It said, "Welcome to Oregon." I was almost there. 6 months later, I was a different woman. I stood in my office on the 24th floor of a Seattle high-rise, looking out the glass wall at the gray, moody waters of Puget Sound. A light rain was falling, washing the city, clean my city. The fallout in Texas had been complete, and it had reached me in small, detached fragments of information, like echoes from another lifetime. An email from a credit monitoring service alerted me that the mortgage on my old address had gone into default and the property was now in foreclosure proceedings. A mutual acquaintance from Austin had posted on social media about a liquidation auction for a local construction firm. And when I clicked on the link, I saw Travis's logo. His business had collapsed just weeks after the bank, no longer receiving my payments, had repossessed his essential equipment, including the truck with the title that was still in my name. The most satisfying piece of news came from a distant cousin of Mark's, a kind woman who had always been nice to me. She'd found my new business number online and called, worried because she hadn't heard from me. "I don't know what's going on with them, Elena," she'd said, her voice full of concern. "Linda had to call everyone to cancel the annual family trip to Florida. She said Mark ran into some financial trouble." Financial trouble? That's what they were calling it. They never knew the truth. They never knew that their comfort, their security, their entire lifestyle had been a long-term loan from a woman they didn't respect enough to even know. They had celebrated my vanishing, just as Travis had predicted. And in doing so, they had celebrated the foreclosure of their own lives. But as I stood there watching the ferries glide across the water, I felt no glee. I felt no thirst for revenge. I had expected to feel a sense of triumphant satisfaction, but what I actually felt was much quieter, much deeper. It was peace. The name on my office door was not Sterling Systems Consulting. It was a new company under a new name. My name. The sign was etched in simple, Elegant gold lettering. Elena Sterling. It was my declaration to the world and to myself that I would never be erased again. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was an email from my newest client, a major tech firm, confirming their acceptance of my proposal. It was the biggest contract of my career. I looked at the signature line on the document, my name clear and bold. The woman they laughed at, the woman they dismissed, the woman they thought was disposable, was the only one who had ever kept them afloat. They had wanted her gone. Now she was. And for the first time in a very long time, I smiled. It wasn't a smile of revenge. It was the quiet, genuine smile of a woman who had finally, completely, vanished into herself and found she was more than enough.